Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
Question is, will they kill untold millions as they did in the last century? It is not the elite cockroaches that determine that. It is you. I premiered Endgame in Austin at the Alamo Draft House on South Lamar this last Tuesday, and I was going through, as I mentioned earlier, some of the things that we had to cut out of the film because it was over 3 hours long, and now it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, really still too long, but people say it's fast-moving. There's so much proof that we're not overstating what you see in the film, we're actually understating it. And I remember in the mid-1990s, it was in major African papers, major British papers, major French and Indian papers in India, that the UN had been caught in a program only for women, because it wouldn't have hurt men, adding a very expensive female hormone, synthetic, to tetanus, because when you bind something to tetanus, it then has the body has an autoimmune response to whatever it was bound to. And that it was basically sterilizing women all over the world, and they've been caught doing this. And that really freaked people out. And then later when we were taking questions, Cheryl Hall, a local Austinite, told her story about how she got really sick from it, really ill from it. And then afterwards, 2 other women came up. And, these are nice middle-class, middle-aged ladies saying that years ago they'd taken the tetanus, and that had happened to them. And then there were people freaking out. Some of the waitresses were going, "Oh my God, I just took it." And then a father came over and talked about how his 18-month-old baby, he gave it the 3rd round of shots like he'd heard, and then it had seizures and was autistic. And then somebody I'd seen on television, high-level Governor Rick Perry's campaign, walks over and says, "I'm with Rick Perry's campaign, and I learned about you a few years ago, but I was here to see what was in the film." And he calls me aside. He gave me his card. I don't know. I think I gave it to Aaron. And he said that before I joined the governor's team back when he was in the legislature, he said I was a medic at Fort Sam Houston down in San Antonio, and they sent 6 guys in from Fort Sill, and they said, "Give them these meningitis shots that came with them." And we gave them the shots, and in 2 days they all died horrible deaths. Then they told us to scrub everything, and basically we got the word it was a bioweapons test. Well, I just shown in the film all these documents where they march our troops in, nerve gas them, march them in, shoot them up, women go into hospitals, hit them with plutonium shots, kill them. I mean, this is just thousands, and it's admitted. And then I'm in a room with 250 people, and they're all over the place, from the governor's office coming up and women coming up, and all of this is going on. And so I wanted to get Cheryl in studio. Cheryl, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Just break down, just in a nutshell, who you are, how old you were when this happened, and then now you've got a bunch of folders and documentation there, basically what you researched on your own and discovered.
Okay, I was 36 at the time. I'm 40 now. It was December of '03. I worked at a vet clinic at the time, and I had cut myself between my fingers and fractured my hand at the same time. Went into the ER. While in the ER, they told me that I needed a tetanus shot. It was at St. David's, Northwest Austin, off of Mopac. And I told them, I said, "If you look in your records, I've already had a tetanus shot 5 years ago here." And they said, "Well, what was it for?" And I explained it to them, and they said, "Well, it's a different kind of cut, so you need another one." I refused to
Which,
sign.
by the way, my dad's a dentist, so I grew up around this. Used to, they said it lasted 12, then 10. Now they say 7. That is a total lie. The same tetanus is the same tetanus. Go ahead.
Anyways, so I refused to sign for the shot.
By the way, I cut my finger almost completely off. They tried to make me take one. I just said no, but go ahead.
I know. Well, that's what I kept saying to her, and she was arguing with me and fighting with me. It was on my right hand that they were doing the x-rays, and they were going to have to, put a cast on because of the fracture.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I don't want this. And she goes, oh, no, it's mandatory. You absolutely have to have it. Now, my husband at the time was sitting there, and he says, she doesn't want it. She's already had one 5 years ago. Why are you doing this to us?
By the way, it's not mandatory, but...
Well, the x-ray machine was coming in. I was watching them bring the x-ray machine in. As I turned my head, she grabbed my arm and stuck me with the shot.
My God. It gets worse, okay.
Oh, it gets even worse than that.
I've had them try to inject my children. You have to watch them every second.
Well, come to find out, she didn't do it in the muscle where it was supposed to be done because of her abruptness, and it went into my central nervous system. And with that, of course, I had the regular reactions where everything swells up, fever, and whatnot for the first 7 days. Well, after that, I started having severe seizures and convulsions. I was admitted into the hospital. I was in the hospital for 4 weeks at that point, and they OD'd me while I was in the hospital, and I went into cardiac arrest and ended up in ICU. And they did this in front of my daughter. After that, I was released, paralyzed on my right side, blind in my right eye, halfway blind in my left, no feeling in my face, no feeling down the right side.
What did they say to you when you said it was the shot? That you were a conspiracy theorist? Or?
Well, no, what they said was that there's no possible way that this was the tetanus shot. It's all in your head, number one. Then I went through, numerous...
Of course, they're liable for malpractice. They're always going to say that.
And the crazy thing is, all of my paperwork was lost from the ER visit.
Oh.
They couldn't find it. The nurse was no longer at the hospital that did it to me.
They lie and say that too, yeah.
But I did actually get a doctor in the ER when I was admitted, when I was having the seizures and convulsions, and she actually filled out an adverse report for me to put in with the vaccination company.
Adverse reaction report.
Adverse reaction report. She signed it. She went through my symptoms and everything. They rejected it. They sent it back to me with a rejection.
And that's why they say that about 1 in 100 actual adverse reactions gets reported because they try to block those.
Well, they did. That's exactly what they did. We got all the paperwork in. We got letters from the company saying, no, there's no possible way. Well, then I started
Isn't
doing
it funny,
research
though,
on
that I
myself.
mentioned tetanus and then all these women were freaking out in the audience?
Yeah, it is amazing.
It just so happens to hurt women, by the way. We're not seeing this with men.
No, it's not. A matter of fact, I started researching it on the internet. I finally got my eyesight back and a little bit of mobility in my right hand. So I was home from work. I couldn't work. I was basically paralyzed, and I had leg braces on. So I sat in front of my computer, and I did research on my own. Come to find out, this thing that never happens to people with tetanus, I was contacting almost 15,000 people worldwide that had the same exact problems that I was having. One woman was in the UK, and we corresponded back and forth with each other. She ended up passing away. Her husband emailed me to tell me that she passed away.
Oh, so it got her.
It got her, yeah. But her story was exactly like mine. I was in and out of the hospital for 9 months. My last bout in the hospital was at Seton, here off of 38th. And I had a seizure that was so severe it paralyzed my stomach. I was on a feeding tube for 5 weeks, and they basically sent me home to die with a feeding tube. They released me from the hospital. They said, you can go with a feeding tube, or you can go without, but you're going home to die. And I was determined to live. I was determined to fight it, because I knew it was there.
Well, you look healthy now.
Well, I'm doing good. I mean, my last seizure that I had was a year ago, Easter Sunday.
And you've never thought about filing suit against them for that?
I did. I hired 6 different lawyers, 6 different times. You know, once you sign up with one lawyer, they have to take your case. You can't go to a different lawyer and say, will you look into this for me? So they would hold my case for 2 to 3 months at a time.
And they take the retainer and then,
They'd take the retainer, and then they'd hand all of my paperwork back and all of my stuff, and this is the exact words out of their mouth. We can't fight this because we'd be fighting the government. Exact words out of every one of them.
And of course, then you learned about the Vaccine Damage Fund and how secretive it is, and how there's millions of people.
Oh, millions of people. And there's very few...
Now, we've had babies die on our street after they get their shots.
Well, that's when I went
We have neighbors dying, and it's just death everywhere, and the injections continue, and the media, and there's billboards, how good the shots are
just
everywhere.
Autism alone that is coming out of our children's vaccinations. It's proven It's
I mean,
on.
they were
you
never
can look
here
it up.
20 years ago. It's gone from 1 in 25,000 20 plus years ago to now. A few years ago, it was 1 in 168. Now it's less than 1 in 76. And then they say that's overdiagnosis. No, I go to see Ratatouille with my children, and there's a whole front row of autistic children and autistic children in the back. I mean, soon we'll all be autistic. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah, it's just crazy how they're doing that.
They just keep saying everything's fine. Just keep injecting. Just tell everything's wonderful.
Absolutely. Also, I wanted to tell you, I got in touch with National Vaccination Reaction. She had emailed me. I left message with her numerous times, giving a little piece of my story. I left messages numerous times, never got back with me.
Now, what is that group?
This is the National Vaccination Reaction.
Sure.
And
so the national level where they're supposedly take the reports.
Right, exactly. And, like I said, I had hired lawyers all the way through the 2-year, because you have a 2-year cap in Texas for them to fight it. The last lawyer that took my case was out of California, and he was an up-and-coming lawyer, so he figured, I'll go ahead and take this case and we'll work on it. He had my case for almost 6 months, I'm wanting to say, and he came back saying, well, we could do it. We would be fighting the government. But what your bills accumulated to and what we'd be fighting for and what we would get out of it, it wouldn't be worth my time because it would be a 15-year process.
90% of lawyers just collect and then talk you down and then get you to do a plea bargain if it's criminal. And if it's a civil matter, you're trying to defend yourself, they don't litigate. You have to actually, usually it has to be a family friend, and you have to have people who like to fight. And there's not many litigators out there.
Right. It was very disheartening because they...
And then real litigators can only take a few cases a year.
Exactly, because they're working. All their time is on that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was nothing to them, and if they had to fight the government for it, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. My bills accumulated to be over $1 million.
Now, unbelievable! Wow.
In 9 months, with the testing and the therapy and everything that I went through.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, you go get a finger stitched up, and it's thousands of dollars.
I broke my finger last year, $3,700 at the year, because I don't have. Oh, that's another thing. Insurance companies will not cover me now because of what I went through. I could be covered for about $1,000 a month. That's what my bills come back as, to be covered.
Well, the tetanus injection keeps popping up. So do the hepatitis shots. So do the MMRs, measles, mumps, rubella. And there's no doubt, seeing Endgame, did you learn anything from Endgame, or did that change your view of how this stuff's going, how it's operating?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I knew a little bit about you. My fiance is a big fan of yours, and he's introduced me to your InfoWars site and that kind of thing. And, I have it on my favorites, and I look it up, and I listen to you at work and stuff. But what amazes me, well, Bilderberger, the whole group, and who is behind all of this and what they are trying to do to us, people need to wake up and realize that our government's not for us. Not anymore. What happened to our founding fathers? I went to Washington last year to tour Washington, D.C., and what I read from statements of our founding fathers, they'd be rolling over in their graves right now.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Powerful info. I don't want to just glaze over this, folks. One of Rick Perry's chief people, I'll just leave it at that, because I didn't get it clear if he wanted it to be talked about on air, who I've seen on television, walked up to me. He was there with 4 members of Rick Perry's staff with him. And he said, I want you to know I really appreciate what you're doing. If you don't know who I am, I met your wife, blah, blah, blah. I was a medic. They told us give these guys these shots. All 6 of them we gave died. They were sent there under orders to be given the shots, and they died right in front of them. They know what they're doing. And Cheryl, you were just talking about how it rotted a huge hole in your arm, but they're saying, oh no, it's not the shot. That's not the reason you went from being paralyzed to wheelchair to walker to crutches. And you were just telling me during the break that you got a divorce over all this. I mean, this was, well, I don't want to say devastating as you've come back, thanks to the grace of God, but this is just amazing.
Yeah, when I had, like I said, I went through so many different things from, being blind, and I still don't have feeling in this part of my face on my right side, and there's a part on my right foot that I still don't have feeling in, just that kind of thing. But I went to dermatologists, they tested my arm, they would do skin grafts on it, and it was just oozing. I mean, for a year and a half after the shot, my arm would just be open and oozing.
But your body was able to beat it.
Well, what they were saying was my body was trying to reject it, and that's why it was oozing, it was pushing it out. But there was one point where when they looked at it, they said, we just need to take a chunk of your arm out so this will stop. And I said, no, you're not taking a chunk of my arm out. I mean, I'm already paralyzed from all of this. You're not going to do that.
Now, somewhere in there you got a report that it was an autoimmune response?
From being through my in my central nervous system.
Yes.
Yes.
Because that's what we've got in the reports. Is now I'm not trying to scare you further, but I mean, who knows if you're going to be able to have children now? Because that, I mean, if it was that particular bioweapon attack and you just had a larger response, that's what the UN program is. I know they were carrying those out here as well.
Yeah, I don't know, because I had my tubes tied after I had my child,
okay,
and she's 16 now. But what about the younger women that are having these shots?
Well, what about the HPV shot that's a live virus?
Well,
I was telling women that, and they didn't believe me at the event.
Mm-hmm.
It's a live virus, ladies, and it's been killing a bunch of the girls that take it. And we've had them on where it's like they're bleeding out of every orifice, things are swelling up, they're getting paralyzed.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing.
Well, my daughter's OBGYN was pushing it on us to have her get it. And I didn't know anything about it when it first came out. So I gave her there's a 3 series. You get one, and then you wait 2 months, and you get another. So I went ahead and let her have that first one because I had cervical cancer when I was 18 or 20, somewhere in there. Anyways, I started reading about it.
Well, see how you've already been paralyzed, though, but you still are trusting the system? Or?
Well, it was one of those things where...
I understand. You want to protect your daughter. The way they bill it.
But I haven't let her have a tetanus shot. As a matter of fact, I had to get
not...
waivers done for her to go to school.
No, I mean, I'm not saying you're bad. I'm just saying because you're a nice person, you don't expect it to be. And again, the nurses pushing this, they believe in it too. That's the beauty of the New World Order system. It's just compartmentalized. They put it in the vaccines, and then the doctors and nurses think it's good.
Right, exactly. But after she had the first one, I also noticed mood swing changes and a bunch of different things that was going on with her that wasn't normal. And so when I started reading up on it, I was doing research on it, I decided that I'm not letting her have the series.
Well, we went
back to the doctor's office. They're like, well, do you realize she's going to have to start this series all over again? I said, no, because we're not doing it.
Well, thank God you didn't take the other 2 shots because it's in the same family. Have you heard about the shots they give you that, quote, cure you of cigarette smoking?
Well, yeah, I've heard something about that.
Okay, what they do is they go in with live viruses and actually attack the brain and actually kill the neuroreceptors and kill whole ganglia of nerve bundles and actually causes a virus-induced lobotomy to where you do not have the same endorphin uptake level.
Wow. No, I didn't hear.
See, it's the most blasphemous, massive evil you can imagine that actually attacks the brain. And the average people aren't even aware of it, and they're trying to make it mandatory in England and the U.S.
That's crazy. That's absolutely nuts.
I mean, but I'm not kidding. You can't make this type of stuff up.
Right.
It is a virus that literally attacks the brain.
I just don't get that. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it's,
I don't get it either.
It's hard for me to fathom.
It's hard for me.
The government doing this to us.
Did you see all the reports in Endgame about the admissions of spraying all of England repeatedly with deadly bioweapons, killing people on the New York subway, sterilizing 42% of Native American women? I mean, it just goes on.
You know why they're doing that? Native American women?
Because they're racist.
Right. Well, they don't want them to produce anymore because, it was their country.
Exactly. And
they want their land, and if they have more offspring, then we're just constantly having to supply to them. The government is. So
that's it. Kill them.
Yeah.
Oh, but the government wouldn't hurt us on 9/11, though. They kill everybody else, but they're not going to hurt us. They care about us. We'll be right back on the other side. Final segment with our guest, then Richard Reeves from New York with Ron Paul News. Going back to Cheryl Hall, who manages a local construction company here in town and came to see Endgame Tuesday night. Just recapping, there were 2 other women who said the same thing had happened to them. There were men there who got the 3rd round of shots, and their children had gone from blowing out the birthday cake candles at 1 to being in the corner, autistic. There was a high-level guy from Governor Rick Perry's campaign. I know him, seen him on television, saying, yeah, I was a medic 10 years ago, and we were told to give shots to 6 guys, and they all died. Later it came out with some kind of bioweapons program. I mean, it's everywhere. In a group of 250, that was the stories right there. I mean, this is massive, but because they don't make it a big issue, it isn't a big issue. And just in closing, Cheryl, any other facets or areas we haven't covered in this, or any of the other? You got big stacks of documents there. We were talking during the break about today. You said this happened to you a few years ago, but you were going back through your notes and you said it made you cry. Can you, go back over any points you haven't covered?
Well, I was just getting my stuff together. I didn't know what kind of questions I was going to be asked today. So dealing with going through the folders and the files and just the different things. And I had to document everything for lawyers' purposes. I had to document every day, everything that I went through. And I broke down reading some of the stuff that I had gone through because you put it behind you. You know that there's, what can you do at this point? That was back in, 2003, December of. I've struggled with it for, a good year and a half to get back on my feet and walk again. And
my God,
you put that kind of stuff behind you. And when I started reading through my notes and what I went through on a daily basis I had a bell by my bed and I had to ring the bell to have somebody come and help. This is when I was at home, when I wasn't being hospitalized, to have somebody come get me to go to the bathroom.
It's very humiliating, yeah.
It is. It's one of those things where, and I remember times where I hurt so bad that I would have to soak in cold water in a tub for an hour just to relieve the pain.
Your body was fighting for its life.
It was. And now I have rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, that's associated with autoimmune responses.
Right, it's in my lower spine and it's in my hands. So
there are alternative ways to get rid of that. Now, let me just, in closing here, walk through a few issues for people out there watching this on the web later or listening to the radio right now, because this is very important. I would like to think, okay, 50 years ago, they gave the vaccine makers immunity. And people say, well, wait a minute. I heard Bush gave them immunity a few years ago and that got reversed. No, he gave them total immunity out of the gates, period. The way it works now is for the last 50 plus years, is since the whole polio vaccine controversy, and I believe that was a bioweapon test, and I've got evidence to that, but the point is, that's another story, is that the vaccine makers never have to pay for liability. The federal government, if you can ever jump through all the hoops and spend millions of dollars in lawsuits, then you can go to a federal board who has, last time I checked, it was more than $2 billion just sitting there, and they hardly ever pay out, and then they'll give you a few million to shut up. And very few of those are paid out. So they basically have almost complete liability protection right now. And so all we can do to fight them is warn people. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying in a perfect world that vaccines don't have uses and they couldn't be clean and couldn't help people. But that's a 300-year-old controversy since they started in England. And a lot of top scientists then said no, it was actually a bad idea. But people like Benjamin Franklin were for it. You can debate it either way. I'm not saying that medicine and science couldn't be good, but when it's in the hands of eugenicists, it's not. So people can argue, well, maybe they're just screwing up. Maybe it's bad manufacturers. Maybe Cheryl is just the, 1 out of a million example. Let me explain something. This isn't just where the government gives them liability protection, so they put out shoddy vaccines, and that's a recipe for disaster. If you've got an industry where for 50 plus years, they've had vaccine protection for, I think, 54 years now. I know they've had them since the mid-50s. If they have total liability protection, that is a recipe to put out horrible, dangerous products that are bred in these tissues and animal tissues and fetal tissues and produced and are so dangerous. That right there is bad enough. But then when you add to it that we've got government documents, thousands of them, saying they're going to use vaccines to sterilize and kill and euthanize people, and then they've been caught doing it. And then you're in a movie theater of 250 people, and you got people from the governor's office going, we gave shots to people and they all died, and women are all over saying, I was paralyzed. This is big. This is big. That's just anecdotal right there. With that, Cheryl, comments to that, to the information I was just putting out?
Well, like you said, they'll give you a little bit of money to shut you up kind of thing and walk away. I wasn't quite that lucky, and when I say that, my bills were over $1 million. My out-of-pocket was $379,000, which I fought against and ended up using my daughter's college fund of $27,000 to pay off my medical bills. And like I said, there's not an insurance company out there that'll take me now. I'm a high risk. So, and it's not just me. Go on the internet, research not just tetanus, but vaccination reactions altogether. It's amazing the stories that you will find and hear, and it's not just with children; it is with adults. It's amazing to me.
Cheryl, I'm here to tell you, the Rockefellers in the 20s, and I've read the university studies from MIT, the top studies from UT, medical schools all over the country, biology departments. They learned that most cancers are virally transmitted, which most Americans still don't even know. And they learned, and they literally bought up the market in the hospitals through foundations, and they control the cancer market, where a bag of pesticide that's worth $1, literal raid, is then sold for thousands of dollars in chemo. And they went out and they put in the vaccines cancer viruses. And they've done it all over the world, thousands of different types of cancer viruses, and it is a scourge now upon us, with cancer up several thousand percentage points on average, depending on which cancer it is, all over the world from what it was in the 20s when they launched that. And we found the original research where they studied cancer viruses and how to make communicable viruses. And then we have CIA studies from the 60s where they did it again in 70s. And they can walk up and just have a little plastic glove within their finger, just tap you on the shoulder, and you're going to die 6 months later of cancer. They have got such diabolical systems. But the main cancers they're putting in are these DNA fragments that lay dormant until there's been a certain number of cell divisions. Then they activate. It's literally like Logan's Run and Carousel. Once you get past that retired level, then they get your whole life's retirement. You saved $1 million and you die, and they get that whole $1 million in that 6 months while they kill you. And you try to tell people this, they just can't believe it. And until we expose this, it's going to continue to happen, and it's the big issue. That's why I want to make another film. I'm going to have Endgame 2, because as much as is in an Endgame, we didn't show 1/100th of the evidence we've got, and it had a lot of information.
Can I add something real quick?
Sure, go ahead.
It's not just in our vaccinations and that kind of thing either. It's in our foods. If you research the FDA and how they are approving what we're eating, and
the genetically
what we're putting in our bodies, it floors me to see not just cancer, but hormonal type situations.
The plastics we drink out of.
Exactly.
It makes our women hyper feminine, and it makes our men feminine. It's by design. They even brag about that. Mm-hmm. It's the type of plastics they use by design, leach, and it's all around us to where we just can't. It's like we can't stop.
Right. Exactly. Matter of fact, there was something that I read just the other day, and this has nothing to do with vaccinations, and I'm sorry, but they were talking about how they are not going to be actually selling whole nuts anymore. Even if the label says whole nuts, they're still going to be pasteurized. So you're not going to be able to get raw food. It won't be available.
Everything's got to be radiated. Everything's got to be through their hands. Everything's got to be controlled. And just in closing, I've had Nobel Prize winners on the show. I mean, I've had top scientists who were making millions and millions a year, top research scientists, living in the big house on the hill, and they believed in genetic engineering. This is 20 years ago with one of the famous guys out of England. I'm going to interview him again because now he's been proven right. And he found that half the rats were dying just after a few weeks being given this particular potato that had been engineered. It had one gene change. But he said you could change that one trait, then it would randomly change thousands each time, each generation of the potato. And he said it was creating new amino acids and new carcinogens that had never existed in the life chain. And he said, we can't approve this. And they said, shut up. Let's just, we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And then he basically got run out of there, and then he spoke out. But it's all these other scientists, and now most foods have it. That's what I mean, folks, the level of the crises that we are facing. In fact, I'm 2 inches away from not making a film about 9/11 truth. And because that's my next film, I've said I'm going to do it, and just making Endgame 2, because this has to get out now. This has to happen now. We have to warn people now. It's just, this is everything. They are doing it to us now. They've said they're going to do it, and they're doing it. Cheryl, I might want to get you back in studio sometime, or we're about to start the new season on the TV show. Maybe have you on the television show in a better setting for this. You can show your documents and go over it. But thank you for coming on the air, because I think doing this, you're going to save, probably just from this interview alone, tens of thousands of people aren't going to vaccinate. Now, the BBC admitted a few years ago, we almost put this in Endgame but didn't have time to, that they even admitted that in Pakistan and several other areas they were refusing to take polio shots because the imams were saying it's sterilizing, because they were noticing women that took it couldn't have babies. Mm-hmm. And of course then it came out in the news, and so then there was the first ever, after decades, release of polio, and it was all over the place suddenly. Mm-hmm. And so don't think they're not going to hit us with bioweapons because we won't take the shots, and then say, see, you wouldn't take the shot. I mean, they are diabolical, folks.
Well, another thing that I know you've got things going on, but another thing that they're doing is giving that live virus, so it shows that we are coming down with these diseases, and it makes people want to go out and get those vaccinations.
Exactly. They give the papillomavirus,
exactly.
and they admit now that it's causing it, and so then it causes more.
Because then more people say, oh my gosh, it's rampant, so we have to get these vaccinations now to stop it.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it isn't a big deal, but with 300 million people, there were only 9,000 cases in 2005. That's the latest numbers we have, and 4,000 deaths. Now, that's a big deal. But there were hundreds of thousands of car accident deaths. But then they admit the shot doesn't even cover you, but for 6 strains, and there's over 300.
Right, exactly. So you could still come down with it after getting that.
And did they tell you whenever they were trying to give it to your daughter that it has live virus in it?
No. Oh, absolutely not.
It's the first popularized live virus, but it's the whole new wave.
Oh, right. Exactly.
What are you going to do, folks, when they try to tell you your son or daughter has to take one that fixes their brain? And you better go read right now. It's admittedly attacks the brain. Cheryl Hall, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
I hope that I mean, if anything, my story's heard and I save at least one person.
Make sure while you're back there they give you a terror storm or something.
Okay.
Anna, say hi to your fiancé for me.
All right, thanks.
Take care. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Okay, folks. Really nice lady. I appreciate Richard Reeves holding the